I believe in a true sense of masculinity, your power comes from stoicism. There was one clip that I saw that I just didn't know what to do with this.
بچه ها من یک سوال جدی دارم. الان نزدیک 20 روزه که در ایران تظاهراته. تا حالا هم اقلا 1000 نفرم کشتن، 20,000 نفرم بردن زندان. مهسا امینی رو فقط به خاطر روسری کشتن، شروین رو به خاطر آهنگی که ساخته انداختن تو زندان. نمیدونیم چه بلای سر اون بدبخت رو بردن به خاطر آهنگ. دانشجوها در دانشگاه ها مثل شریف رو گرفتن، کتک زدن، کشتن. از رژیم جمهور اسلامی سوال دارم، میخوام بپرسم که از مردم ایران چی میخواین شماها؟ از جون مردم دیگه چی میخواین؟ یعنی در نهایت هدفتون چیه؟ میخوای همه مردم ازت فقط بترسن منظورتونه؟ بدون که همه فقط میترسن، هیچ احترامی براتون قائل دیگه نیستش، فقط ترس. میخوای مردم همش در حال گریه و افسردگی باشن، خنده و لبخند از همه گرفته بشه، اجازه رقص و موزیک نداشته باشن؟ Seriously, shut the fuck up about روسری bro. خداییش چی میخواین شماها؟ مگه تبهکار کمیک بوکین همتون؟ از ناامیدی مردم جون میگیرین حکومت ومپایر؟ میخوای خوشحالی همه گرفته بشه، حال همه رو بگیرین به جز خانواده های خودتون که همشون خارج از کشورن؟ اگر اون ایرانی که ساختین و شما اینقدر خوبین، چرا اونا نمیمونن؟ پول مردم رو که خوردین، نفت و طلا و از هر چیزی که تونستین سوء استفاده کردین، همه چی هم فقط واسه خودتون برداشتین. مردم از گرسنگی و بی‌عدالتی دارن میمیرن. بی شرفا همه ازتون بعدشون میاد، همه یه مش آشغال و احمق و بیشور با هم ریختن. کامان برو، کشور به این قشنگی و خوبی، مردم به این زیبایی، فرهنگ شگفت انگیز و تاریخی و بهش ریدین. یعنی واقعا ریدین، از لحاظ اجتماعی، از لحاظ سیاسی، از لحاظ اقتصاد، هر جوری که تونستین ریدین به این کشور. دست از سر مردم بدبخت ما بردارین کثافتا. حالا که ریدین برین. 43 سال مردم میخوان از دست شما راحت شن، مردم میخوان باهات بریک اپ کنن، دیگه نمیخوانه. تو رو خدا برین همتون. مگه میشه همتون بیشعور باشین، دل نذاشته باشین؟ پایه هر حکومتی در اصل انتخاب مردمه، پایه هر مذهبی در اصل انتخاب مردمه، پایه انسانیت و حقوق بشری اولی انتخاب مردمه. شما فقط میخواین حق همه رو ازشون بگیرین. خب این که هدف نمیشه. اگر یکی رو باید کتک بزنی تو این آمیز باشی تا باهات بمونه، این که رابطه نمیشه، میشه تجاوز و خیانته. خاک بر سر همتون. واقعا چی میخواین شماها؟ هر چی هم که بخوای ما دیگه نمیذاریم. از این تهران تا اون تهران، زن، زندگی، آزادی.
After I saw that clip, I'm saying, how can you expect someone else from the outside to humanize with your message when you're being aggressive and you're cursing and you're calling people, you're wishing death upon people? You're almost portraying the stereotype of what they try to portray Middle Eastern people as, up to Western standards, as being potentially savages and uncivilized. Don't wish that upon your people. Wish for true positive change, but wish, your messaging needs to be grounded, and you have to maintain your masculine stoicism to just be able to see the situation from a very logical point of view and not omit history. History has a huge part to play in your country, and history is no different from you going to a doctor and asking a doctor for medical advice, and your doctor trying to diagnose you, but he didn't check your medical records to see the history of your health and the effects that have played throughout your health and things that have plagued throughout the history of your health. So that is valid.
They've continued to say that the type of uranium that they're enriching, of course, is for nuclear power.
And they are, in fact, building new power plants.
Yes.
In cooperation with Russia, which is why the United States needs to up its rhetoric around Iran enriching uranium when the data, in fact, they released the numbers just last week. They said we're enriching it to 60%. That's nowhere near needed for a weapon.
Right.
That's what's needed for power plants, which they intend to do because The Ayatollah there is a Ba'athist, and Ba'athist philosophy is energy independence inside Arab nations.
Oh, they don't want that.
No, Baathists want this.
No, I know, but the United States doesn't want
The
them
West
to be independent.
absolutely does not want this. And in fact, Baathists are not really, they believe in equality for women. Because they feel like that is necessary for a modern society. That's not me saying what this Ayatollah wants. I don't know, right? But we are not usually told what their politics are. We're told it through the lens of how we need to control them.
Well, of course, and this is how the Western leaders portray Iran, right? So it's much more nuanced than they would have you believe. When you have the likes of Anthony Blinken and President Biden telling us that this regime is awful and is, the horror of the world, and you have Tony Blair, warmonger, we should all be concerned of warmonger UK Prime Minister, former UK Prime Minister, and warmonger Tony Blair he's been working in the shadows in Iran for quite some time to destabilize Iran with the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Don't let that name fool you. They just want regime change. They want Iran wiped off the map. That's exactly what they want. Of course, they wanted Iraq wiped off the map. That's why he joined George W. Bush in doing that. And pushing anti-Iranian propaganda has been Tony Blair, completely ignoring the far larger pro-government demonstrations that have been taking place. So those have been totally ignored by the Western press. The Tony Blair Institute has been claiming that the overwhelming majority of Iranians are atheists and seeking to overthrow their Islamic government. And he keeps talking about as a scourge and evil of the world. So listening to Tony Blair and how he paints Iran.
And a conventional desire for regional hegemony. What we miss in this superficial and Western-oriented analysis is the core motivation, which was, and forever will be, the promulgation of that ideology rooted in an extreme version of Shia Islam, which is the Shia equivalent of the more radical elements of the Muslim Brotherhood and of Salafi jihadism. The internal IRGC documents which we analyze are explicit. The organization is committed to ideological political training of recruits. They proclaim an existential threat to Shiism from Sunni Arab Zionist Western axis. They mandate on religious grounds the expansion of the revolution to other nations. They authorize the killing of Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians and pressure to make them give up their devious beliefs. And they share the same litany of extremist views on social issues, including the status of women, hostility to gay people, and the sanctity of their image of Islamic society.
Now, of course, all of this may sound very familiar to you if you've been paying attention to Syria, because almost the same words. It's like right out of a playbook. Like, yeah, these are all, they hate Christians, they hate Jews, they hate all of these other people. When in fact, anyone who's lived in Syria can tell you that it was one of the most cohesive, loving places with all sorts of religions and sharing in a community until the West got involved and helped destroy that peace. So that's exactly what happens here. So is this correct, what Tony Blair's saying? Not even close, of course. He's a warmonger who's been pushing for the overthrow of this government for a long time. So you need to put it through that lens when you hear a guy like this talking, painting the whole country as extremist. Satare Sadijai, an Eshtefan, an Iran-based scholar and teacher, spoke recently to our friend Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone. And she says many people support the hijab and support the practice of wearing the hijab. But many Iranians oppose the morality police to enforce the wearing of the hijab. And all of this differs from province to province as you travel around Iran. Listen. Well, let's talk about Iran now, where the West continues to put pressure in trying to topple the Iranian government. My next guest says Iran is the target of a massive information war that is coordinated to push for regime change in that country. My guest is Satara Sadiki. She just wrote a fantastic piece for the Gray Zone called Iran's Unrest Triggers Explosion of Fake News. And journalist Sadiki joins me now. Nice to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you too, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, what was the impetus for writing this piece? Obviously, you live in Tehran. You're watching all of this unfold on a regular basis. Why did you decide to tackle this subject?
Yeah, so basically, like I studied in Tehran, but now I live in Isfahan, where I was born, and I wrote that piece together with my friend, colleague, and co-host Christopher Weaver, who lives in the U.S. And the thing was, because I was observing everything, as you said, on a daily basis myself, things were like the things that I was seeing on Western media was like too crazy to feel anyone would believe that. But the thing is, when you live outside Iran and you don't have much access to, especially Persian speakers inside Iran, it becomes very difficult to understand what is true and what is not. So Christopher helped with understanding what are the parts that the Western audience does not really understand because they don't have the information. So I tried to address some of the like craziest lies that went viral on social media that to a lot of us Iranians living here was like very, I would say, stupid and crazy to believe. But it became very important when I saw that, especially on social media, there is almost nothing or next to zero information, like authentic information about what was exactly happening inside Iran. And I felt I have to do something about this because I know that there are many people with good intentions in the West, but they do not know what exactly is happening, and some of them are worried about what's happening, and some may fall into pushing for their governments for actions that further hurts the Iranian public.
So you highlight in the piece specifically Western media outlets from the BBC to the New York Post have spun out a series of reports, I'm quoting you now, accusing Iran of killing more protesters than civilians killed by Russia in Ukraine. And a lot of this coming from think tank pundits and NATO governments. They've claimed that Tehran has sentenced 15,000 people to death simply for participating in anti-government demonstrations. That's what the West sees. What is the truth?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, because of, as I said, lack of information coming from inside Iran, you can say anything about Iran, and the West is going. I mean, the majority in the West are going to believe in it. And one of the again most outrageous things that I saw was the claim that 15,000 peaceful protesters are going to be executed in Iran. And the shocking thing for me was that, for example, Justin Trudeau of the Prime Minister of Canada, or Elijah Wood, a Hollywood celebrity, tweeted those things, and like Trudeau had to remove it, but other celebrities and social influencers did not even remove it after they found out that this was not true. So it started with kind of distorting pieces and bits of information that was available on Farsi-speaking media, and they just put together and they make speculations, and they made headlines with them. Sometimes these people maybe did not really know what was happening, but in what I was observing, it came from for a large part of it, as we have written about that, there were NATO allied think tanks, and there were also the MEK, which is a very notorious terrorist cult that has assassinated over 17,000 Iranians and also some Americans. So they were behind, and they knew what exactly was happening, but they had to they wanted to persuade the Western audience into pushing their governments, as I said, into taking an action against the Iranian public, for example, imposing further sanctions, or like what we saw in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, just more occupation, which brings decades of destruction and deprivation of just human rights, because when there is war, it becomes very difficult to provide basic needs for, the public.
Right. So the BBC using these examples, the New York Post running with these things as well, all sorts of different Western, CNN falsely claiming that a family home of a female Iranian rock climber had been demolished as punishment for her participating without a hijab in a South Korean competition. So there's a lot of misinformation specifically around the hijab. We've covered on our show how it is the choice of many Iranian women to wear the hijab on their own terms, right? This is not. Can you talk a little bit about that disconnect, that misinformation that exists about the hijab specifically?
Yeah, I think it comes from these exceptionalist and cultural centrism mindset that things, the way people do things in the West is better and superior and more, closer to human rights observation. While there are, in different countries, people of different cultures observe their human rights and women's rights in a different way. I have actually interviewed some young university students who even took part in the legitimate protest that started just in September on my on my YouTube channel and podcast. We interviewed them, and I asked one of the protesters who was wearing the hijab like more relaxed than the way I am wearing, and I asked her if there was no mandatory hijab, would you be covering your head the same way that you are? And she was like, yes, it's not the issue for us and for many of us, even though at the same time there are women who want to have the freedom to choose what to wear, and we support them. We have, the thing that is often overlooked about Iranian women is that the majority of, for example, Iranian university students are female, something around 57%.
Wow.
And women are very active and outspoken in the society. They have managed to change the laws to improve it for them through parliament elections, through NGOs. Like there are over 2,000 NGOs that are focused on women's rights inside Iran, and they are actively working. And because as someone who has lived here for all my life, I have taken it for granted that women can freely observe a lot of rights that they have. So it becomes very difficult for me to understand how many in the West do not understand that. Well, yeah, this is this simple form of covering, head cover or dressing is something that you might not see very often, but it's good to ponder and pause for a second and thought maybe this is a woman's choice too, and this is what is happening. To give an example of how this Western media works, there are so many memes on the internet about how women were free before the popular revolution that we have in 1979, whereas now they're oppressed by men because they have to cover their heads. And you see images of the women in bikini on the beaches before the revolution and women with head covers after the revolution. But what those memes do not tell you is that, for example, the literacy rate changed from we have something close to over 90% of literacy rate now. Nobody talks about how over 90% of, for example, gynecologists in Iran are women. Nobody talks about how over 50% of university students now are women, whereas before the revolution that would never happen. So, it's you take one cultural matter and you just focus on that, and then you provide an image which is totally distorted.
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.